Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're joined by special guests Colleen Grafton and Nathan Keys. Colleen, Nathan, welcome. Why don't you start by introducing yourselves and telling the audience a little bit about who you are?
Great. Thanks for having us. I can go first. I'm Colleen Grafton, and I am a human living in Chicago, Illinois. And as part of that human experience, I also write software. I have a background in marketing automation software, but lately I've pivoted into HR software. And like most people, have also done a little bit of e-commerce in there. Primarily, I'm a back-end engineer, but like most people, I also do a little front end when it's required.
Cool. Hi, yeah, I'm Nathan. I'm a software architect, similar background. I'm also a human, believe it or not. Chicago is home. I currently reside in San Francisco. Not sure when I'll be moving back, but that might be happening soon. As far as my background, I've done a little bit of everything, mostly back end, but then like industry-wise, lots of things. Everything I've done. If I had to choose one thing, maybe finance, because I've done like Federal Reserve, high frequency trading, and also I worked for an exchange. Currently, I'm working in the field that is actually roadside assistance. We're probably one of the biggest monopolies you've never heard of.
I want to go deeper on all of that, but not today.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
so to set the context, many years ago, all four of us were working at the same company. And I came in, I was, I think, the last one to join. And I was hired as a contractor to keep the lights on work for the legacy system, while Colleen and Nathan were working on a replacement system, which was a full rewrite. And it was called Nozomi. And eventually, well, as I came in and as I was working on it, I started to think in my head, hey, there's a pattern here that I've seen before, and it doesn't end well. And we went down the road 9 months later. Well, I was out 9 months later, but eventually things continued to not go well. And that's what eventually led me on the path like that has Isaac and I doing this podcast today of Never Rewrite of, oh, here's the pattern, that it started the genesis. So I wanted to bring Colleen and Nathan on to kind of talk about the experience from both sides. So I guess let's start at the beginning. How did the decision to do a rewrite come about? Like, what I know the code was terrible because I worked on it.
Yeah. So I can jump on that. Interrupt me as necessary. So like again, for me, it started from one, yes, the code was terrible, but then two, one of the issues that I saw where we worked was that like there was an overbearing focus on firefighting and not enough focus on let's build fireproof things. So that there was a lot of that. And then also I was trying to solve for my team's happiness, right? So that like again related to that focus on firefighting rather than building fireproof things. Like when I started on the team, the team was from my perspective like deathly afraid to do new work because like we didn't have a test suite that could guarantee that new work wasn't going to bring the system down. So those were for me those were the driving factors of that, like let's build something that's fireproof so that we're not always putting out fires. Let's build it in a way that's well tested so that the people working at it are happy. And I think, yeah, so those are my primary concerns. And then I can kind of let Colleen speak to her perspective on that.
Yeah,
And also
I think all
Isaac
that's
was there
true.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
go
would
ahead.
say all that's true. I think one component of the software's like bugginess and legacy-ness was also that we were just outgrowing it. Like we were getting, we had clients for a long time. This was a pretty old company. So we had like 9-year-old clients that had just grown and grown and grown as we had grown, but that software was not able to support the throughput they required. I think from a business perspective, there would have been no initiative to do any rebuild if we'd been able to support those customers, and
Right.
the bugs would have just been, part of doing business. So, also there was a very small lottery factor. There was only two of us at the company of 100 engineers at the time that understood the system. I'm very confident in saying that. So, I don't think that's a good thing. And I think people were starting to realize the danger there.
Right.
And
That is a
to
very
be
high
clear,
buzz factor.
Colleen was one of them, and I was not. And that's why Colleen was so helpful to me.
Okay, so there was a system and it was buggy from before, but you don't think the bugginess wasn't enough to, I guess, get the rewrite authorized. It was also the company was outgrowing the company's customers had outgrown the system, right? It was, if I remember correctly, it would fail on sends more than 1 million. It would fail something like
Yeah,
75% of the time.
yeah. And
Um,
then like when it would fail, we wouldn't know why. I think it was a
mm,
big part of it too. Like another other thing that we're trying to solve for is like when they do go wrong, we were like trying to solve for transparency to those failures.
Yeah, I would say transparency is a huge issue. I would disagree. We didn't know why. It was we didn't know why fast enough to make a difference to anyone. We could
mm,
figure it out, but it would be,
Yeah, fair.
somebody
Yeah.
at their desk doing stuff for
Mm.
3 weeks and then saying, "Aha, this is why it didn't work," which doesn't help a customer at all.
Mm.
yes, I guess why only matters in the first 20 minutes.
And also speed. I would say the system worked decently enough, but I think it became unacceptable for the amount of time. I think at one point we're talking like 4 to 8 hours to get
Mhm.
a feature done or like get a send out. So that was just unacceptable to a lot of customers.
Yeah, I remember late in the game testing something after I'd fixed kind of the major reasons it would die unexpectedly problem. And I would do a test, I think for like 5 million, and it would take something like 20 hours. So
That sounds right.
it didn't die,
Yeah.
but it still wasn't, I wouldn't say that it worked.
Yeah.
It didn't fail,
Yeah.
but I don't know that it succeeded.
Yeah.
Maybe
It
you
took
shouldn't
its
have
sweet
so many
time.
customers. Have you considered that?
Right. Have you considered being a smaller company?
Have you considered making less money? I heard that's popular.
So
Yeah.
how did you pitch to management that you should get this rewritten or started kind of a new
I was
project for
just
this?
thinking that like oh sorry. So in hindsight, like I'm not sure like how we got this approved, right? Like at a certain point, like I feel like it was just persistence of that, like, like at a certain point, I'm like, and I think a lot of it was like, if we don't do something, like we're gonna lose Colleen, right? That like, and part of it was that like for me was like pitching, like I said before, like keeping the team happy was a large part of it. And I think that like and at the time, I felt like I had enough like political capital to spend, like, all right, trust me, if we do this, this will work. Um, yeah. So again, like I don't. Maybe Colleen, if you have a better idea, but like I don't know how we got this approved in hindsight.
It was
But
definitely all
because,
you. Yeah,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
say. I wasn't in any of those meetings,
yeah,
partly by choice.
Yeah.
I am this might be an unpopular opinion. I'm a big proponent of do what my boss wants me to do to an extent. And especially at that time, I was not a senior engineer, so I wasn't in a position where I thought, I'm going to fight everyone about this. So
yeah.
they
Right.
want to rewrite, I'm doing a rewrite. If they want me to fix bugs, I'm going to fix bugs. And then I want to please like my boss to an extent. But so yeah, you convinced them. One thing I remember that really impressed everyone was your due diligence with AWS cost analysis.
Oh yeah, that's
So
okay. That's right. Yeah,
Mm.
you were able to say, this is how much it's going to cost us per email to send.
yeah,
And you had, like spent many weeks
yeah.
getting those numbers ready. So I think everyone
That's
was
right.
like,
That's
we
right.
love numbers, let's do it.
Yeah, that's right. I remember because like I was able to. Okay, yeah, I remember that now. And also the spreadsheets. I also think that like from a product point of view, that like one of the things that was I thought was super helpful was that like you had a much better, deeper understanding of the product than I did. And then like we were working from this spreadsheet that literally had like close to 50 line items of like, here are all like the nitty gritty milestones that we're going to hit from a product standpoint, right? And I think that was a big help too. That like we had like, because of Colleen, we were able to prove that like, yeah, we're going to start with like the lowest possible impact. Like we focused on it from do the least risky thing first, right? And kind of like using in hindsight, like using Martin Fowler's like kind of like the constrictor pattern that like isolate the thing, piece by piece. And Colleen did a great job
Yeah.
of like coming into like a prioritized list of here's the like I said, the in order of least impact, and then building to riskier things that would actually end up being less risky, because by the time we got there, the system we were building on in theory should have been proven and tested that these bigger things are actually less risky. That was the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, we took a big feature and we basically categorized each like possible use case of the feature. So
Mhm.
that was really easy. Once you did that, you could just put things in order.
That makes sense. And how long did you think it was going to take, like when you sold it to management or just in your head? How long was the project, did you think?
That's an interesting question. I don't remember. Like, I think also part of my frustration too is that like for a long time, this might not have been the actual case, but it felt like it was just Colleen and I, right? um, because like the rest of the team was focused on like we were on the same team, but like it was only Colleen and I. It felt like who were actually dedicated to the project. Until but that changed.
At no
Um,
fault of the teams. That was like a
Oh no 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 no
management
no no yeah yeah no no no
resourcing
yeah yeah
decision.
yeah,
Yeah, I just
yeah,
want to call that
exactly
out.
yeah no, like and that was a hard decision like all right who gets to work on it I think was like part of the thing is that like and how do we balance that with that like you know but yeah so that's a roundabout way of saying I don't remember how long we said it was going to take right but also part of it was because it like I remember we did do like I remember and I wish I had still had access to these spreadsheets. But like that was another spreadsheet that we did it like all right, does it like if you give me X junior engineers and Y senior engineers, I think we can do it in this amount of time, but never really got that allocation.
I do remember you're more optimistic. I was
That's fair.
probably thinking like a year plus, and I think my opinion, if when I was asked to share it, was not received well, so it was slowly asked less to share my opinion on
Yeah,
how
that's
long it would
yeah,
take, which is
That's
fine.
real.
yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely part of the pattern that I have seen in the past is the the rewrite is supposed to take 6 months, regardless of how big it is. In theory, it's supposed to
Yeah,
take six
six
months.
months
Yeah,
sounds great. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sounds good.
yeah. And he said like, and it doesn't matter how big, but like has to be 6 months.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I got brought on as a contractor. I'm gonna say early 2019. I feel like the project had been going at least 6 months by that point, or maybe more. Like, did it start in 2018, 2017, you think?
I
I
feel
think
like it maybe. Go
code
ahead.
development, I was going to say 3 months, but yeah, the project 6 months.
I was thinking like January sounds right, like January 2019, but I don't know. It's been a while. A lot has happened since then. Yeah,
Right. That's in the pre-pandemic days,
yeah,
the before times.
yeah. It's a long ago.
Okay, cool. So I got brought in, right? And my role was to keep the lights on. And Colleen was critical for me, just for giving me the lay of the land. And I remember those absolutely terrifying I don't want to call them UMLs, but things from what's the name of that company? Lucid Charts, those Lucid Charts explaining how the whole thing worked. And you went through them with me, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. No wonder this doesn't
Yeah,
work.
Yeah. At one
Um,
point, I asked you, I said, is this the most like complex thing you've ever worked on? And you said, no, it's the second most. And I was like, I was kind of had my ego bruised a little bit. I was like, oh, dang, I want this to be the most complex
yeah.
thing he'd ever seen.
I'm trying to remember what I said was the what was in my head.
I don't know
Well,
if we're allowed to say company names, but it's a White Sox stadium.
yeah, okay. Yes, that was also an interesting solution to a very odd problem. Um,
For another episode.
for another episode, yes, that was also me applying an iterative approach against a company doing a full rewrite that never succeeded. And I would have to check, but hadn't succeeded as of like 2020. And now you're
Well, you
going back
kind of
like
spoiled it. You spoiled that
6
it
years
never
ago.
succeeded here.
Yeah.
Well,
Spoilers.
maybe it has. I mean, it's been 3 years since I last looked. Um, but they were in continuous rewrites for at least 6 years when I was paying attention. Right. So in my mind, so kind of my perspective was I got called in to do the keep the lights on work so that they could give more resources to Nozomi. And I guess without trying not to sound too arrogant, I'm much more willing to tackle those. I'm terrified to make a change in the code because I don't know what's going to break. I'm like, let's do it. Let's see how many times I can do this and not break production. And also, I am fine with breaking production because it's like, well, if you didn't know, you were going to break production anyway. I'm I might be. That sounds way more YOLO than I truly am.
Well, I think that that's an important point, right? Because like, and I think in a healthy organization, like you optimize for reducing that cost of failure, right? That right, like breaking production shouldn't be a scary thing, because if you break production, you should have things in place where like you can roll back, right?
I think also, like you're not a YOLO programmer, and I think the difference is like the communication. So as a person who I think had um, 6 engineers when I started, 100-ish when you started, Jeffrey. There's a lot of people who came through the door and didn't even try to talk to me, or started to talk to me and then decided I was talking a lot and they didn't need to hear it, and then they broke the code. So there's a huge difference between doing that and like reading all the documentation someone wrote, talking to them, really listening to them, and then breaking production. Like the end result's the same, but I see a huge difference.
Yes, I feel my recollection is I broke production in small ways many times, but I never broke production in a large way. That could be somewhat rose-colored glasses looking backwards, but that's kind of my recollection. Is I'm sure I broke I caused incidents, but I don't believe I caused any major incidents. And I left the code. Well, I guess my perspective on the thing was, what eventually happened is I fixed enough bugs and added enough observability that they eventually, after I was out, after my contract was up, and I left, they eventually canceled Nozomi and just decided to stick with the original system, which, it didn't. There was the things that you were saying, which is it didn't make developers happy. It wasn't fast, and you lost developers.
Yeah. Like I think we all left pretty quickly around the same time, right? That like I think that like you left, and then very shortly afterward, I left. All four of us left. I feel like
you left, then I left. That I see.
Okay.
Mine was not related to like it's. I mean, they are hand in hand, but I liked being a subject matter expert. I liked being like a person that people would come to with questions. But the company, like just having such a limited number of people who understood how the service worked, like that forces the company to rely on one person too much. Like there's just no way around that. So I was feeling pressure from all sides. And it wasn't like, oh, we're so grateful to have you. It was like, why aren't you always around? Why are you not always available? We need you all the time. And that's part of the reason I left. So it wasn't really so much the bad feature or the bad code. I like working in bad code. So.
Same.
I also enjoy bad code.
Actually, I think most of my work on that project, I didn't do a lot of the actual net new code. I think most of it was me going through and trying to find hacky ways to optimize the old flow. And I found a couple that helped them hit their goals, and that's really all they seem to care about. I guess that's kind of like the flip side of it. If you find a hacky way to do it that still meets their goals, then they're going to not really care about the delivery of the real solution.
Yeah, and think to me that like my ultimate answer is like what went wrong was we were solving for different things, right? And it wasn't clear to me until basically I decided to leave that they didn't understand as well as I had hoped or thought what I was trying to deliver. It was ultimately about like, the short-term numbers, right? And like we were just solving for different problems.
Yeah, definitely. So like that project's definitely what got me to like what I consider to be senior level, like efficiency as an engineer. So at the time I was kind of leveling up, and I would get pulled into these meetings, and the CTO and VP of engineering would ask me like, is this project worth it? Like, are we going to get it done soon? And I was like, these questions should have been asked like way before we started writing a line of code. So I can try to like come up with an answer for you, but it makes me feel uncomfortable that we're having this conversation today.
How do you remember how far the project got along with the deliverables? Like I have the vague recollection that there was one type of email that it was working and sending, and maybe two, and then that's as far as it got. Or
because I feel like remember the spreadsheet was like between 40 to 50 lines of individual small things grouped into like 8 or 9 large feature chunks, and we definitely got the first one, and that was transactional emails of like I think like password reset I think was like the first use case. We definitely got through that. I don't remember how much further we got through. Like, I don't think we got through 3. We might have gotten through the second phase.
Yeah. And I think that was another issue is like you had alluded to, we were thinking, oh, this is brilliant. We're going to tackle the like
Mm.
least important stuff first, and then it was
Yeah,
going to be really stable when you get to the most important stuff.
yeah.
But leadership heard that, and they essentially said, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why can't you just do the most important stuff first?" And
Yeah,
that was another like we were just approaching the problem from two different directions.
yeah, and it was really like I remember I had very vivid recollection of like this one particular thing I think happening a few times where that like we would be in a meeting with the VP of engineering where we were looking at the spreadsheet, right? And we're going through like when everything is going to be delivered, and the VP would point down at the bottom like, well, can't you just do this up here, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
that happened a
like
lot.
and it's like I thought like they were asking for just go faster, right? But like no, like they were like in hindsight asking for a literally different problem to be solved, right? Because like my interpretation of that ask was, cut corners, go faster, like hit the same milestones but do it faster. But what they were really asking for was, and again, this is something I think before that, like we want to see immediate customer impact now, regardless of the consequences later. And I think that was a big problem.
Yeah.
Whereas that like not only was it like I said, like we're always focused on firefighting and never building fireproof things. Another thing that I think like led into it was that like one of the culture items was put the customer first. Whereas in my perspective, that meant put the customer first at the cost of your coworkers, right? That like we were doing like we had a teammate like who was working on something like overnight, like he pulled like a 20-hour shift or something, working on ultimately a account that wasn't worth much money. But I understand that the client that's important to them, but like I would rather lose a client than put my coworker through that again. And then so that
Yeah,
like we would
there was a bit of
and
that going on.
yeah, and the company would always like focus like no, you like need to put the customer first. Whereas like my argument is like, well, we do that by building things that don't catch fire, right? But the company's like, no, you need to be firefighting.
Yeah, it's a lot like climate change.
Yeah, yeah.
I think in the startup industry in general, that's just kind of like the preferred method is we're going to keep doing short-term solutions for as long as possible and even past possible to the point where it's actually hurting us, but we don't realize it because short-term solutions that seem like dramatic fixes or like you delivered, oh wow, you already delivered that to the clients in a couple of hours, that kind of thing. Even if it's like it's not going to scale or it's not a good fix, that's still in a lot of cases it looks like a false sense of progression.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, this is maybe for Jeffrey, who's done a lot of rewrites, but is it feasible to take a product that had been built over 10 years? Because at that point, we were working on code from 10 years ago. Like, you could go back and see the commit when it was added to like Git, and that was maybe 6 years ago. Like, is it feasible? Is it a reasonable ask to say this thing that took 10 years to build, like rebuild it in X time? That's not 10 years. That's shorter than 10 years.
This whole podcast is dedicated to the answer of no. No, it's not reasonable. You can iteratively progress, like change it piece by piece. It's like building a better mousetrap by changing every piece in the mousetrap instead of saying I'm going to invent a new mousetrap and then just not use the old one.
Yeah. Like a bridge. It's like bridge building in that way too.
Yes.
I was just going to touch on like the project disconnect for me was I wasn't building anything helpful. Like that's when I started to feel like I panic because I personally need to see my work either like help a customer or at least make leadership happy. Ideally both those things, but maybe just one, like during an ebb and flow. And neither of those things were happening. Like I wasn't helping the customers because all my time was spent on this rewrite and leadership was not happy with the rewrite. So I just felt like not successful day in, day out. And that was a tough thing for me.
Yeah. Could you dig into that? Because I wrote that, I was writing down the difference Nathan was getting into where it didn't, in retrospect, it didn't sound like they wanted you to cut corners so much as they wanted you to do things in an entirely different order, like do the things that would deliver customer value, which
like not
maybe were not possible, but that's what they wanted.
Yeah. At least like not even a different order, right? Because like the ask was so different that like ultimately the ultimate deliverable would have been different, right? That it wasn't just a different order. It's like they were asking for a different thing,
Yeah.
right?
Sometimes
I
I
think
wonder, I wonder sometimes if that was like the ask of something different was due to a lack of understanding of the initial complexity. Because, like I
Yeah.
mentioned, it was me and one other person who knew the platform well enough, and I'm not trying to make myself sound like a martyr. I attempted to document, I attempted to have meetings day in, day out to teach this to people. It wasn't easy. It's not easy,
They were
but
good.
thank you.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes I got a little upset, and I apologize to anyone that was in that meeting. Um, but like leadership, I don't know if they understood the complexity of what we're doing, because if we had like
yeah,
10 people that understood the platform as well as I did, it would be a lot less of a ask to say,
Right.
do the hardest thing first. Because that's 10 people bouncing ideas off each other, checking people's
hmm
work,
Mm.
feeling
yep,
very confident that PRs are not going to break the system. But we only had me, and I was essentially a roadblock, I would say, because anytime someone would say, like, let's do the harder thing, let's do this, let's focus on that, get it out to customers, I would always be the person in the room going, well, can't like do that, right? Because we haven't tested this. And like, we can do this, but I don't think it's going to work that well. Right. I have 20% confidence. So you take that, how you will.
They just
Um,
labeled you as like the naysayer at that point.
there would, I
Right.
think I'd said Isaac, and I think I'd said this to all of you at one point. Like, I just feel like I come into work, I give my opinion, I get frowned at, and then I go home. It was like what I was doing. And that didn't feel good either.
Right.
It's sort of like the Cassandra where they hear you, but they don't like what you said.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they
Which
still
No, I
is
have to fix
definitely,
it.
fine. It's
yeah,
fine to be unhappy with the project. Like Nathan was unhappy with Isaac too. We were all unhappy with the code base, but at least the engineers sort of like understood that it wasn't just like nonsense I was making up, but it was actual
Yeah.
no,
reality, and reality has consequences, as opposed to like, no, I'm not trying to throw shade at leadership, but like they don't always operate in the reality of the code
no,
base, right? Like they operate in some other side reality that's like close, but not really.
Yeah, you'll promise a product that make reality kind of adhere to what your promises were supposed to be.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
fake
And
it till
that's,
you
I mean,
make it.
that's leadership's job. It's just,
Right. Yeah.
looking back, I've had such better experiences where it's not even me, my boss is the voice for engineering, and they were able to very calmly and successfully tell product, like, we need to do this in addition, or we need to do this instead, or we need to prioritize this. And I don't know how those conversations are working. It's amazing to me. It's brilliant, but it's comes out well in some of my other experiences. Like, it's just a balancing act.
Awesome. I guess it wasn't awesome. It was actually kind of
Yeah,
upsetting.
it inspired awe in
My
a scary way.
monologue was, yeah, my monologue was awesome. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yes.
Yes, your monologue was awesome. Um, and then the end came after my contract was up and I was out.
Mm.
Um, how did that, like, did they call you into a room and say we're canceling it, or did they say we're putting it on
Oh,
hold? Like, was it
geez.
officially canceled? Do you
So
Yeah,
remember?
there
like,
was a meeting for sure.
yeah.
I remember
But it
that.
was weird because like it was like it was killed, but then also like not quite killed. Like we're not gonna continue it, but we're gonna take like what you did and turn it into this other thing. Like I remember like this offsite that we had. I think was it an offsite? Because we had a new director.
I think that
Hmm.
was leadership only, not the lowly people like myself. I was never
Like,
invited to offsites.
okay, I just maybe it wasn't an offsite, but like I just remember being in like a meeting room that like felt like it was a different office space. Like again, this was like memory might not be 100%, but then like I feel like yeah, we
We
did
did
like
get a
the
new
meet.
office floor, so maybe you're thinking of that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that might have been it. Because like I just remember being like doing like a basically like a long whiteboarding session of like how do we take the husk of Nozomi and turn it into this other thing.
Mm.
And then yeah, um yeah, like I have a lot to say about that is less about Nozomi and more about other things. So I'm not trying to
Sure.
filter. Yeah. Um
The humans
yeah,
around
yeah, yeah,
Nozomi.
yeah. Right, like
The
yeah.
project ended badly, but
Yes, yeah,
and feelings were hurt.
yeah.
Yeah,
Basically,
it ended for sure.
yeah,
And there
it
was
for sure
no
did. Yeah,
resolution. And I think I was like, at that point I'd been just like the naysayer role too long, and I was like, I don't even want to go back to what I was doing before, because I feel like there's maybe it's just me, but I feel like there's a general negative perception about this section of the
Yeah.
code that for
Mm.
whatever reason the people around me cannot separate from my identity. So I moved to like a completely different team and never looked at it again.
Was that before or after I left? Like, 'cause I remember, like, for me, like, when the project ended, like, it became, like, for me, like, I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about, like, how this all went down. And I feel like, to me, that, like, I felt like I had, like, a protective, like, little fiefdom of, like, all right, I'm going to build this safe space for me and my team in amongst, like our squad is the dog, and this is fine meme, right? But like everything's burning around us, but we have this safety bubble. But then, like, when the project was canceled, it was very clear. Like, okay, well, no, that like I'm not, like, this isn't fine, and it never will be, and we just don't see eye to eye, and it's time for me
Yeah.
to be somewhere else.
I think your safety bubble at any company is only as large as like the person you trust the least, you know? Like,
That's fair.
don't trust anyone. That's my takeaway.
Don't trust anyone. Colleen's business plan.
So attempting a rewrite completely made Colleen paranoid and destroyed careers. It's just a bad idea.
No, I would not change it. Is that a question? Would you take it back? No, I would not.
Yeah, and
That's
that's the thing.
that should have been a question.
Yeah, like,
You're welcome.
actually, and the thing is, like, I would have done the same thing too. I think in hindsight, what I think I should have done better is earlier on making sure that, like, what I thought I was delivering was what leadership wanted, right? Because, like, I feel like that was the real problem, is that, like, I don't think the rewrite was the problem. I think there was, like, the misalignment on the goals, right? Because, like, if we were aligned on the goals, I feel like we would have been given more resources, and it might have actually been successful, right? But I think the real issue was just that, like, there was the misalignment on goals.
Yeah. I got to learn Python. That was awesome. That's also, like I was saying, I like leveled up my experience in distributed systems, which is invaluable, I would say. I think it was a learning point for me to say, okay, I want to make leadership happy. Like that's my job. That's why I get paid. But I need to have like confidence in myself to know when that's not like no longer serving me. Like make leadership happy until it's making me unhappy. And then maybe I need to like take a look at the current environment, see if it's good.
I admire your attitude. I've never managed to convince myself that my job was to make my manager or leadership happy.
For my own mental sanity, Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's funny, because, like, for me, like that's the opposite of that, like, because like I'm solving for, like, is my team happy, or, like, is Colleen happy, is Isaac happy? And because, like, in my experience, and maybe this is arrogance, but, like, we're the ones that are normally right, and management is so far removed that they can't possibly be right.
Sure.
There is no right in this situation.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it is extremely subjective. Fair. Yeah.
I also don't manage anyone. I could have said that in my intro. I'm an IC for life. So it's a lot easier for me to just put the onus on myself to, like, okay, I want to make leadership happy and I want to align with them most of the time. So I need to go find a job where I align with leadership. And, like, if I just do that, then I will be happy. But that's like an easy thing to say, hard thing to do.
No, I mean, that's very enviable. I also am an individual contributor for life. And when I manage people, things go very badly. But I think part of it is also that I have a strong independent streak, let's say, and come up with my own independent. You've never seen that.
I'm kidding.
I come up with.
He's got a Harley Davidson out back and straps on some leather.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. Like I analyze it and I figure out what is next. And rather than take leadership's word for it, I attempt to convince leadership that I'm right.
Have they ever hated you?
Yes.
I like being liked. This is my thing. I do not like situations where anyone is actually upset with me. Like I'm always down for a healthy conversation, but when people are actually upset, that makes me very upset.
You're
I definitely had a couple places where the leadership got upset. Yes, including the one time I got fired. That's how they solved that.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
And that's a very legitimate, in my mind, that's a very legitimate way to resolve it. If you can't convince me and I can't convince you, You're the boss. You can fire me. That was not a healthy situation. But
Yeah,
I,
it's not healthy no one can see, I'm gesturing to my heart. It's not healthy in here to be doing that over and over again, in my opinion. Every once in a while, that's fine.
awesome. So to summarize, to kind of bring it all back, the Nozomi rewrite was all about trying to get a fireproof system instead of a system with lots of firefighting, trying to get to a place where developers didn't have fear of touching things, a system that supported the customers, a system that, and then just to make developers happy. And the rewrite failed, but it did, in the meantime, it did make developers happy.
Well,
Yes.
it made me happy, and it made I think I think Colleen made the point that like at past a certain point, no, right? Because Colleen, like, sorry to speak for you, but like I'm just going to repeat what you said, is that like, yeah, like, you wanted to make somebody happy, whether that be the client or leadership, and at a certain point, it was clear that neither of those things was happening.
Yeah. It made engineers happy for a bit about that.
Yeah.
I just had one last question, I think, before we wrap up. So you mentioned, we touched a couple times on that in retrospect, you were trying to deliver something different than what leadership wanted. Do you think if you'd had the time and the resources to deliver fully, like if you'd been able to drive the project to the end, do you think they would have been happy with the result given what you know now, like in the retrospect?
I think so, right? Because like the way I think about it is like it's also like, I know I said that like we were like delivering different things, but also I think it was that like I think it's more accurate to say that like I was trying to get to the end goal through a very different path, right? That like yes, we did share the end goal of having a better, faster, cheaper, more reliable system, but my path to that was, if you build a system that's reliable and makes developers happy, then it's a necessary fallout that it's going to be easier to build a system that is going to work better and cheaper and faster for the customer, right? Because it's like I worship at the temple of Sandy Metz, Pooter. The idea that if you have one metric for the quality of your code is changeability, right? And if your code is changeable, you can adapt quickly to changing product requests. If it's changeable, then when you run into performance things, great. Like you solve for changeability first and performance second. And that's really what I was getting at, is that like the idea that like, clean code, tested code, reliable code solves all of these problems. It takes a little bit longer, but in the end, if we actually do that, the long term is actually higher velocity in the agile sense.
Would it be fair to say it this way? You and leadership had the same goal in mind, but you were taking the path of least risk, and leadership wanted you to take the path of most value.
I would add perceived qualifiers to both of those.
That is good. You were taking the path of least perceived customer risk, and they were wanted you to take the path of most perceived customer value.
Yes. I'd say
I would
that's pretty
say,
fair.
just to be fair to leadership, they weren't necessarily saying most customer value. They just wanted us to more customer value. That's what I would say.
Okay.
I
Awesome.
don't think it's possible for the project to succeed. I don't like, because you mentioned given unlimited resources and unlimited time, like if you define resources as like talented engineers, yes, it's possible to get those people, but we essentially needed people with subject matter expertise, and you can't just pay your way into that. You have to be really good at learning or be there for a while, or some combination of those two things. And we just didn't have that, and there's no way to get that. I don't know, in my opinion. I think a part of a question of should you rewrite should be how comfortable are you with the system, and what number is that you representing in human beings? Because are 10 people really comfortable with it? Like, great, go for it,
Have we beaten this horse to death?
I could talk forever.
Talk about this forever. I have so many opinions.
Yeah.
You just made me remember, like, anytime I started working with someone new to the system, and they would be like, well, we can just call this function send because that's what it does. And I was like, there's 900 other functions called send, so no, we should try to find a different name.
Yes. Send no one-word function names.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Thank you.
Thank you,
Go
Nathan
ahead.
and Colleen. How can people get in
Thank
touch
you.
with you if they want to get in touch with you, argue with you, tell you how much they think you're right or wrong?
Mhm,
If,
mhm.
I don't know how much you
Harass.
want to argue with people on the internet.
I just said I don't even like arguing with people in real life, so less so on the internet. LinkedIn, because I am not an active internet user, and I don't like LinkedIn, but I do check it. So if someone needs to get a hold of me, I'm there. Colleen Grafton, located in Chicago. That should get you pretty far.
Yeah, similarly for me, LinkedIn, Nathan Keys or just N Keys, I think is the username. And again, I'm not like on any other social, so yeah, LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and thanks to you, the listener, for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.